encourage. There's a number of you that are on here today. What we see is this is a first step of a potential process for you to become a foster carer and listen. We are very much, so one of our themes is don't rule yourself out. Come and speak to us if you're interested in fostering, because it's really important. Liverpool City Council have just under sort of 13 or 1400 looked after children, and they all need specialist sort of fostering placements. Now, some of that could be short term, long term, and the like, and I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail. But really, what we say is always, if you've got an interest in fostering, then we want to speak to you. It is about sort of this is not going to be the big sort of it'll tell you everything, but know that there's also going to be Phil and Vicky. So I'm going to pass you over to Phil, and he can introduce himself.
Hi everybody, thanks Paul. My name's Phil Watson. 10 years ago my wife took me to one of these meetings, only it was in a real kind of like building. We live by Penny Lane. Welcome to my semi-detached house. We've been involved in fostering ever since, and a few years ago the council decided to pay me to talk about fostering. And it's possible, I talk a lot anyway, and it's possible I've met some of you before, and I'll be chatting a little bit later as well. It's nice to meet you on a Zoom. Over to you, Vicky.
My name's Vicky. I've been fostering for just over 12 months now. We were interested in just giving kids some stability from what our kids had. And my first step forward was getting in touch with Liverpool City Council, and they literally bounced back information straight away. And that just started the process off for us.
Liverpool Council use a lot of their in-house foster carers, but also we have a bit of a reliance as well on children who are in our independent fostering agencies. Now, we've got to try and sort of work on that balance, and we've got to try and look for people who are in the Liverpool area to look after Liverpool children. That's why I said we've got such a diverse sort of cultural and sort of diversity of the number of the children through their ages, whether the babies all the way through to teenagers. And we need people who are able to care for them and give them that sort of stable, secure background, and just to make sure that they are cared for appropriately. So we always say that fostering is a very in-depth process. There's an awful lot. I mean, Phil will go on a little bit about some of the process, but there's an awful lot of sort of reports that you have to do, and it is a bit of a warts and all. But really, if you're thinking about it, if you were if somebody was looking after your child, if you had children, then you'd want that to be making sure that we were doing our jobs properly, making sure that it was appropriate match, and that basically that we were getting to the stage where children are having really good positive outcomes. We know that as a group of sort of foster carers who are out there, that children have really, really close and really, really good outcomes if they're in good fostering placements. So we're going to talk to you tonight about some of the support and some of the benefits of being a foster carer for Liverpool City Council.
So fostering for me has completely turned my life around. Before I went into foster care, I was quite lonely and quite isolated, but having somebody there for me every single day, knowing you're going to come home to somebody who's there to listen to you, it makes you feel so much more confident, and it allowed me to see my future. So for anybody who's looking to become a foster carer, I would say do it, because it is so life-changing for a young person. Before I went into foster care, I was so sad, and I was so, I had such low self-esteem, I wasn't confident, and everybody around me nowadays has noticed the difference in me. I'm so much more confident now because I was somebody's priority.
So there's just an example of a few of our foster carers who illustrate really that anyone can do it, as long as you've got spare room, as long as you've got the time to dedicate, then, you know, like Paul said, really don't rule yourself out. So we go to Vicky now, if that's all right.
The first thing that I think sort of terrified me was the thought of going through the system of it, because I didn't realise. And you hear scary stories that, you know, they're going to go in your death past and they're going to interview everybody, and you're thinking they're going to be coming in and they're going to be judging me, and it's not like that at all. They do have to have references, and they do interview your children if you've got children, and they do, but it was nowhere near as terrifying as I first imagined it to be. You know, you're opening your doors to social services, and you're thinking, oh, are they going to say we're good enough? And it's that all that being judged, whether we're going to meet, you know, the standard that they wanted. But once we started the process and we were allocated a social worker and she went through everything with us, it sort of puts you at ease that, you know, they don't expect everyone to have a perfect background and a perfect life, and, you know, they understand that we've all had ups and downs in our life, and if anything else, it makes us better to help the kids that we will work along with, because we've built up resilience and given ourselves tools to deal with that, and we can pass them on to the kids that we have who come with us. I mean, when we got passed, we were passed to have 1 to 2 children if they were siblings, and I think in the last 12 months we've had 14 kids who we've had with us from 2 weeks, because at the beginning we did respite, and for us we found that was really good, because it made us decide, one, on what age group that we were probably best fitted at, because we had babies, we had 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds, we had 8-year-olds, 14-year-olds. So for us, it sort of gave us a gauge of where we think that we could give the most to a certain age. And we were quite lucky because my husband works for himself, so I was able to give up work to do this full time. And I think what you need to think about if you're thinking about having young ones, that you need to be home all the time. So, you know, if you are carrying on working, think about what age you would best fit with you and them, because you don't want to start a placement and it fails just through lack of time or communication. I've met as well lots of foster carers, one that was 81, he was amazing, you know, so there's no age limit either. You know, if you've got the love there and the capacity, you know, like you said before, there's 1,400 kids of lots of different ages. You know, they just want someone to listen and love them, and somewhere to feel safe, warm and fed, you know. And for us, we've gone from being temporary foster carers and respite to we've taken on 2 placements that we're going to hopefully have a permanent match, so they're going to stay with us. And then we do, I'm not even going to say temporary, because as you know, how long is a piece of string to how long you may have a placement. And then we've taken on another placement as well. So for us, it was always about doing what's right for the kids as well as our family. And we're lucky because we have a very big family with lots of kids and lots of babies. So when the kids come, they instantly feel at home, because the attention, even though it's on them, it's on lots of people. So it's not like whether, you know, they get absorbed into our family. That's the best way we can say it. For whether they're with us for a week or whether they're going to be with us for 10 years, we just absorb them into the family, and it's just like they're here and that's it. And they've always been here for the amount of time they need to be with us. And obviously the dog that doesn't like kids, you know, runs from them, but they like him. They like him. And, you know, we've had a few achievements where we've had kids who've come and hated dogs, and by the time they leave, they want one. And you're thinking, foster care you go back to, you mightn't be over keen on that idea. But it is, you know, for us, it's been a real sense of satisfaction that we get to be able to give a sense of normalcy and a home for kids, and that's why we did it. The first placement we had a little boy, and he had some issues, and whenever the dog went near him, he would scream. And we only had him for 2 weeks. We had him for respite, and over the 2 weeks we had him, he went from screaming if the dog came in the same room as him to lying on the floor playing with the dog, because over time he built up confidence to be able to go over and stroke the dog. And it was all just time and patience with him. And he's great, like if you're walking him, lots of kids don't want to talk to you face to face. They'd rather, and I've found that if we're walking, they'll say things and then carry on with a different conversation, but it lets you a little bit into their past and what they've been through, because they don't want to sit and have a face-to-face conversation with you about it. But if you're walking the dog, a little thing might bring something back to them. So for me, he's really good in that way. You know, he's a great distraction, especially when they first come, and they're unsure and they don't know what's happening, they don't know your routines. You know, they can go and sit on, I'd say he runs away sometimes, you know, but you will go and run after him. But he will, you know, he's been a good icebreaker in that way, you know. And a lot of the kids now, because we still keep in touch with some of them, they come back, and I think they want to come back and visit the dog rather than visit me and Gary. You know, he's far more of an appeal than we are. But he's worked with a lot of kids. He's just for them to sit down and touch him. They like to stroke him, the tactile, because they mightn't want to touch you because you're a stranger to them. Where with an animal, it's a bit different. One of our challenges, we had a placement that wasn't going well. If I'm honest with you, it wasn't going well at all. It was an emergency placement, and we had them for 3 weeks, and it wasn't going well. The placement wasn't right, and we ended up, I had to ring up, and they did send me out. To be honest with you, we got support, and they sent us out a family link worker to try and help support the placement, but it wasn't right. It wasn't right for us, and it wasn't right for them. And I think sometimes as well, it's acknowledging your own weakness, that sometimes some placements, they just don't fit. I think Phil said one of his first placements and his wife was going, no, don't want to do it. This isn't for us. You have to know whether the placement's going to work, and if it isn't, you're probably doing more damage trying to struggle along, and you end up losing the will to live, and you'll throw the towel in. So, you know, get help and realise your limitations as well. And it's not a weakness to say, listen, this isn't working. Am I glad I did it? Yeah, hands down. Wouldn't have changed what we've done. We were filling out a all about me form tonight with the kids because they're moving up in school, and we said to one of them, you know, what's your favourite food? And he went, Gary's spag bol. I'm sorry, Vicky, but yours just isn't as good as Gary's. And you're like, cheers, thanks. But you know, it's little things that to them now, that's just home. And you know, if you ask them what makes you feel better if you're upset, oh, a hug off you and Gary. You know, sometimes it's not going to be hearts and flowers with them, but it's the little things that you think, you know what, we're doing all right. We're doing the best we can, and these kids are feeling happy and content. And so for me, it was never a doubt that we shouldn't have done it. You know, even the sleepless nights that I'm getting now, still it's fine. But you know, I don't regret any of it now, and I've just grown in confidence in my abilities.
I think, thanks for that, Vicky. I think one of the things we talk about with fostering is that, yes, it isn't always easy. There are demands and challenges, but it can also be great fun and extremely rewarding. We've got some of our foster carers who have been with us now for over 40 years. And I think it's one of those things, you know, you get a lot of pleasure from looking after children and seeing them sort of develop. Our key thing is that we need sort of, you know, the different types of fostering. So really we need homes for children. And that really is the question. Is a home, you know, we need it to be a foster home. It's not a foster placement. It's a home for children of all ages up to 18. And that's including babies and toddlers, sometimes single children. In Liverpool, we have a significant number of children for sibling groups that all need to be placed together. So we've got a large contingencies or a lot of sibling groups that need to be placed together. We have some children that might have additional needs. Some may need to be have physical or learning difficulties, but not to the stage where they're disabled and they need house adaptions and the like. That's the Children with Disabilities team. That's a different process from fostering. We need children who are cared for on a short-term basis, and we say sort of time limited short-term, but that can be anything up to 2 years. And obviously, when you have a child in placement, that can change depending on what the needs are. We are aware that there's times we're needing children for long-term and permanent care, and then we're also needing somebody to do some respite and some short breaks. So that might be that they're not actually looked after children, but they might just need a break to ensure, or the parents might need a break, or it might be they're in hospital, or there might be certain support that's needed. I mean, clearly what we're trying to do is we work with families, and sometimes we don't know how long this is going to be because we're in a court process. So the court to determine where those children are going to live, and whilst that's going and whilst that's being assessed and undertaken. And whilst those decisions, we need somebody that's a safe pair of hands to look after these children and give them that love and care and attention, have all the rewards of of looking after a child, which are there is a significant amount of rewards, but we do acknowledge the sort of challenges, and later on I'll come on to some of the supports that we offer to help you through that. And I know that Vicky's already alluded to some of that when she was having some of her conversations.
Hello everybody. I'm very noisy. You're gonna have to just live with it. So this photo here, they're my birth kids. We just tend to call them the kids when we're at home. And there's me and my wife. Oh, I'm getting all emotional. And you can see a little boy being hugged by a girl. He's facing away, and he was a looked after child. And 10 years ago, my wife said, "Should we go and find out about fostering?" And I just went, "Yeah, why not? Yeah, all right, like a date night." And we did end up with more kids than I ever imagined. So it was quite fruitful in one respect. We went along. A lot of people spoke to us. I took in some of the information. And I think, as Paul alluded to earlier, I did begin to think about kids that were in care who were living with strangers. And as you can see, I've got 2 birth kids. They were 6 and 8 when we started fostering. And I did think, what would happen if they ever had to go and live with strangers? How nervous they'd be, how scared they'd be. A bit like if a kid ever goes like on a sleepover, you know, if you've got children of your own. And I just thought, wow, even if my son, Jamie there, if he goes to his mates age 5 or 6, he's a bit nervous and he knows where he's going, knows how long for, he's taking his stuff. So we just said to ourselves, let's apply to foster and let's see what happens, because maybe the council will say, you're not quite what we want. Or maybe through the process, we might even decide this isn't quite what we want. Or maybe we'll get, and they use the phrase, maybe we'll get approved to foster, and we'll end up looking after a child. So the process, I mean, this is 10 years ago, but it's more or less the same. You can, and I know Karen will explain this at the end, you ring up, or you can fill in an online form. You have to be over 21, you have to have a spare room. And we had all those things. And so a social worker rung us up, her name was Pam, and she said, "Hello, I'm going to come round to your house. And I want to chat to you about becoming a foster carer." And Pam came round. We'd never had a social worker in our house before. So I was terrified. I ran around tidying up. My wife was much more cool about it. As you can tell, I talk a lot anyway. When I'm nervous, I talk even more. Pam came round. She had a look in all the rooms, and we showed her it was like the box room in our house. And I said, "This is where a foster kid would live and would stay." And she went, "Yeah, that's fine." And she gave us a few tips about health and safety, all reasonable stuff. And then she sat down at our kitchen table and we drank a lot of tea, and she said, I'm basically going to turn your life upside down. I really want to know all about you. And I'm going to fill in a big form about you. I mean, it's not really a form. It's more like a book. It's about 80 pages it could be, all about you, whether you're married, whether you're single, it doesn't matter, about your family and why you want to foster. And this lady, Pam, I think she visited us over the next 3 or 4 months. She visited us maybe 8 times. And each time she'd come with a new question, and she'd ask us to think about it and to write down some ideas. And then she helped us type it all up. So I don't want to go into all of the information because we'd be here forever. But she wanted to know why we wanted to foster and how we got to be where we were in our lives. So, for example, I know I look good. I'm 49. We were nearly 40 when we started fostering. I'm from a place called London originally. It's a terrible place. Everyone should move to Liverpool. And my mum and dad moved into a house in 1975, and they still live in it. So when I go home at Christmas, I go back to the house I was a kid in. And one of the things that motivated me to foster was because I'm from a very, very stable background, and I wanted to share that with kids who didn't have the same stability. My wife's one of 4, and when she was a kid, her mum and dad had a very bad divorce and the whole family got scattered. And so she wanted to foster to provide that stability that she lost. Both reasons are completely viable, and you'll have your own reasons for wanting to foster. So this lady, Pam, the social worker, she types it all up, writes it all down, asking questions about it all the time. We needed to do health checks. We needed to do police checks. She wanted to know who was going to help us to foster, and we have various friends around in our area where we live, around the streets around here. So she wanted to go and visit them. She wanted to see some bank statements to see whether we were kind of financially stable. If there's no point in putting a kid into your house on Monday, if you have to ring up on Wednesday and go, oh, we haven't paid our mortgage or our rent, can you come and get this kid? You know, they need to know, the social workers, whether that you're stable. You don't have to be rich, you don't have to be poor, but they want to know whether you can kind of manage this. They wanted to know about our lifestyle, sort of day in, day out. So I'm a teacher when I don't kind of go on Zooms like this. And so they were going, oh, so you could do all the holidays. See, we had kids who were 6 and 8. So I was like, yeah, no problem. I can manage all the holidays. My wife was working for the council at the time, and she had like flexi family hours, and she was part-time. So if we ever needed to take a foster kid to the doctors or to a meeting, it was like, yeah, we can manage that. And all those things, the flexibility in your life, in your lifestyle, are very important. We went on a course called Skills to Foster. I think there was about 10 people on ours, and it was in the Dingle, opposite the Dingle McDonald's, if that helps you, in a building called the Toxteth Annex. Oh, really? And we did, just, I don't know where yours was, Vicky, and we learned a lot. But you're learning a lot but you're not being sort of lectured at. You just we kind of did some role plays where we had to. That sounds bad. I mean, I know Vicky's husband hated it. I'm like, yeah, what a laugh. And they're just trying to get you to think, the social workers, of what would it be like if you were a kid coming into your house. So the whole process took about 6 months. It can be a lot less than that, can be a little bit more. And we eventually got approved, they call it, to foster. This panel of people meet, and you go and sit in front of them, and you're nervous. And we've already established, when I'm nervous, I talk a lot. Sat down next to my wife. My wife says, don't make any of your jokes, just be quiet, just nod. And your family might be different from mine. And we got approved to foster. And then that's when the journey really begins, if you like. And you're waiting for a phone call, and it's exciting, but it's nerve-wracking. But I remember thinking, whichever kids come to stay in our house, they're going to be more nervous than we are, more scared than we are. And in 10 years, people get disappointed by this number, but we've had 7 kids, and they always think it should be more. I mean, Vicky, you're on way more than us. But the shortest time we ever had a kid, he literally came for a day. The longest time is the kid that's in that photo, actually. He arrived, I think he arrived, like, can you look after him for a bit? I know it's probably short term, there's a technical term. He still lives in our house, and he's going to be here forever. He's somewhere behind me, somewhere in one of the rooms. I'm quite surprised he hasn't wandered in. Karen's kids are back in her room. Look at that, she's looking at them. Get out. And I just tell you one little story about that kid. Say, he was so... I'm going to cry, because I always do. He was so withdrawn and so scared when he arrived. He's scared of everyone, scared of everything. And then about a year ago, maybe, every morning, he's 13 now, so he's not a kid. Every morning, me and my wife would help him put his shoes on to go to school. He had like Velcro, so it wasn't difficult. He could do it. And then one day I said to my wife, have you noticed that he puts his shoes on himself? And my wife went, yeah, he does. And we realized that, some kids get A-levels and GCSEs and go to university. For him, putting the shoes on was the last thing he did before he went out of the house. And leaving the house was scary. Our house was safe. Going to school, even though we knew everyone there was a lovely place, it was scary. So him getting us to put his shoes on was his kind of little routine to have us as close as possible. And then, because he was putting his shoes on himself and he was going out the door like on his own, we were like, you know what? It's another little milestone. It's another little moment where he feels comfortable and confident. Our house is safe. It's like they call it safe base often in fostering. Our house has become a safe base, so he feels safe to investigate the world around him. And you spot things like that when you foster, and you go, we did that. I could talk more, but I'll stop before I start crying.
Very quickly, and we come and do a visit. Now, some of these are virtual visits at the moment that we're undertaking, and once we've undertaken those, and if it's okay with you, and you're saying actually this fits in with what I was wanting it to be, I can do this type of fostering, and we talk about what the different types of fostering are, then what we can look at then is you coming on to either a skills to foster or going straight into an assessment process. And what we say is, if you're at that stage where you're wanting to foster, we'd send an application form out. from the time of application form, us receiving that, to actually you going out to our fostering panel, which is the big panel that Phil talked about whether you are able to meet the sort of the standards that we need, and you've got everything that we want in foster carers. We expect that to take you 3 months. Now, we've had some people recently, and that's actually taken 8 weeks because of actually, whereas you think sometimes the difficulties with the pandemic that we've got at the moment, they were available now more than they were previously. So they were able to have the time, have the reflection time, but we were able to go through the whole process a lot quicker. And actually, because it was we always do it at your sort of pace, because obviously there's no point in rushing things and you're not understanding what that's going to what the role's going to be like. We don't expect people to come into this knowing everything and being foster carers and absolutely, it's a bit like the driving license. You know, you come along and you go and you get some of the skills and you know some of the theory, and you think, okay, that I've done this. Some people have fostered, or some people have looked after their own children, some people haven't. You know, we look at, you know, we've got people who are in same-sex relationships. We've got people who are a very diverse background, and as Vicky said, you know, some of our carers have been with us for an awful long time, and actually they're in 70s and 80s, you know, but it's about, they've got an awful lot to give still. And what we sort of look at is we look at what the child needs, and we have this, and Karen alluded to earlier on, it's that match. Because really, if we get this right, and you've got the personality and you've got the energy and you can look after this type of child, it's going to really work for them and for you. So that's where it's really, really rewarding, because you get the best of everything, really. For us, it's about why come to sort of Liverpool? Well, we say that we offer professional support. We've got a dedicated supervising social worker who would, and also we've got family support workers. So if there are difficulties, like when Vicky was saying, look, actually, there was challenges within the placement, we were able to have somebody that come out to a home and actually offer some support. We've got access to 24-hour support and helpline. We've got a comprehensive training program. Now, obviously, you can imagine we're developing that at the moment. So we're looking at all of that being online as well, so that we can actually do this at home rather than actually being in a face-to-face sort of location. But because that's the other thing, is we don't expect people to know everything and know the sort of the history of children and look at, okay, I know attachments, I know, you know, how to look at boundaries, but actually that's part of what we do. We put in a lot of work and a lot of support. So we've got these comprehensive training program. We've got signposted to specialist children's services, so it might be the CAM services if the child is going to need that. We've got free membership and resources to UK's leading fostering charities. We think that's a really, really useful tool, because we get information sent to all of our foster carers on a regular basis, updating them, but also there's training packs and there's information that comes from there. So we use Foster Talk and Fostering Network, and they're some of the leading providers to support, and they provide independent support as well. So we find that is an incredibly useful service. Financially, we offer competitive sort of skills-based payments. An allowance is paid for every child, and that's to cover for obviously the day-to-day expenses. Council tax exemptions and savings. What they're saying is the average saving is £2,350 per year. Obviously, that you'll know what you would normally pay in your council tax. Clearly, we have a mileage allowance that's paid. So if you're transporting a child to contact, or if you're taking them to school, and we expect that you were able to claim mileage for that. We have a setup fee of up to £500 per child, and also if you've got a baby in placement, then some of those fees are going to be rolling programs, because every time you get a new baby in, you need to have a new mattress, and you know, you might need some specialist equipment, and we're able to put that in place for you. We look at for us, there's an awful lot of training opportunities, and I think it's you know, we turn around and we say, look, we've got, you know, I think that for me, it's all well and good that people coming forward, but actually it's about that package, and I think that's where Liverpool do really, really well. We do look at specialist training for baby carers when we're talking about attachment. We also look at independence training as well. We've talked about how it is, you know, social media. There's digital services training. There's an awful lot of training. It's a wraparound to a core training, so looking at your safeguarding. But I think, because that's it, we don't expect people to have those skills. We've got to enable you to do that, and the more the training you undertake, the better that you the more knowledge that you have, and the better you're able to understand the child and provide that care and that love for them. So we get much better outcomes when we're doing that. So it's because it does that, it raises people's confidence. It's and it's not about people think we know it all. We've got some of our foster carers who are just predominantly baby carers. We've got some of our carers that are wheelchair bound, because I think people will go, well, if I'm in a wheelchair, can I foster? And actually, we always say, come and speak to us. Don't run yourself out. It's really important to have those conversations with us, because actually Liverpool is one of the biggest local authorities in this area. And one of our things is we have so many children coming in. We have so many different types of fostering. We would really, really like to hear from people. One of the things we talk about is actually it's like a fostering community. Phil will say that actually he's still in contact with a number of the people who went with the Skills to Foster, and it's like that you have that journey, and as you have that journey, you have these friendships. You meet people on a regular time on training programs. We have monthly forums for foster carers, and they're sort of the sort of events and the itineraries is raised by foster carers. So then we'll get specialist people in to talk about different types of training, so fetal alcohol, or there'll be all sorts of different I suppose it's depending on what the topic is, and what the interests are from foster carers. It's led by yourselves. We look at social events for foster carers, families and children. There's free lifestyle centre membership, the household. We have a lovely caravan. I think we'll come on to a picture in a minute, in Prestatyn beach resort. We've got a recommend a friend scheme, and one of the things we do find is that Everton, the community, are really, really sort of integral and supportive of fostering for Liverpool. We get free discounts and tickets for local events. We've had Everton games. We've had the Netball World Cup. As it says, the pantomimes and theatre tickets on a regular basis. It does feel like a community, and for us, we were able to, Liverpool have actually bought a caravan so that foster carers can have that a little bit of time with the children in a location that's safe but got lots of activities. And I think we found that that's been absolutely fantastic. An awful lot of our children have used it, and it's been really encouraging, actually, the amount of times and the memories that they've had. It's either on the beach or the activities that they've got on the site itself. And also, one of the other things that we've done is one of our big events that we do every year at the moment is the Christmas party. And last year we had over 550 people, so that was sort of children and adults, in St George's Hall, and that was amazing because it was able to speak to, I suppose, a lot of these children and the foster carers in a celebration way. Really, we were very supportive, but also, it's about sort of that sense of community. It is a very challenging or it can be very challenging to foster, but also it's very rewarding. And actually, it's really nice to see a lot of the families who meet every year at the Christmas party and our other events as well. And it is that thing, because it'll be myself and all of my team are all there, so it's everybody all sort of catching together in a nice environment where there's no real pressure. I think we had one of our people were dressed up in Father Christmas. We had all DJs. We had everything. It was just an amazing event, and we couldn't have thanked them more, really, for that. For me, there is a huge amount of benefits, but also, if you've got any questions, I think this would be a really good time if you want to either put on the chat, and we'll answer any questions, if that's okay.
We've got one question, which is about the difference between the adoption process and the fostering process. So I know Phil's adopted, as well as fostered. So how does that process differ? And what about the consideration of the ages of both children or adopted children during the process? How are the ages of existing children taken into consideration?
Shall I start off with a bit? So when we started fostering, our kids were 5 and 7, I think, or 6 and 8, something like that, and we were advised by the social worker to keep the birth order. So so whoever we fostered, and that's why the little man who's with us has been with us 7 years. One of the reasons it works is because he's 3 years younger than my son. So it's worked like that for us. So it basically goes daughter, son, foster kid in that order, and it works well. So as an example, he's worked out when my daughter wants to go to university, and he's worked out that she's going to be going in a year or two, and he's already saying, who's getting her room when she goes? And my son's gone, hang on, you don't get it because you're the littlest. I get it next, and then you get my room, and we'll move up like that. And it just works as a pecking order, and that would be my advice. But it might be different for somebody else. You might find that you want older kids, but that certainly worked for us.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that because I grew up in a fostering household, so it was really it was keen about the impact. And I think that one of the things that my parents did really, really well was it was involve us in that process. And I know it was a long time ago, and I'm not going to say it really was a long time ago. But I think that, we have an awful lot of foster carers who have their own children. And what we look at is what their needs are. And that's when we talk about this match and careful, because obviously we do, it's not just you that fosters, it's your whole household and your support networks, your neighbourhood. And it's about actually what works for you. So we have a number of people who have obviously children. Some of them aren't necessarily adult children. And there's some conflicting advice, because at one stage it used to say we should make sure we've got a child who's got at least 2 years difference between you and your own children. But a lot of the children we're looking at don't chronologically function at their biologically age. So it's not always that case. I think, every case is individual, and every child is, and it's about what their needs are. The actual assessment itself isn't much different. But it's just looking at it in a different aspect. We're looking at how you got the skills to look after a child. They're looking at a slightly younger age range, but actually a lot of the assessment is the same. It's the same, looking at the skills, looking at your health and your education, looking at your background, looking at what you can offer to a child. And as Vicky says, it's not that we want people who are absolutely perfect, because we don't live in a perfect world or society, and it's not, we're not estate agents. We want people to have a lived-in household. We don't want it to be, this is about, being real in some respects. We need somebody who can look after a child and look at their needs, and being able to have that really good conversation with them and bring them through the difficulties they've got. They might not tell you what those difficulties are to start with. They're going to have conflict of interest of how long we're going to be here, and we're going back to a family. A lot of the children that we're dealing with have in some way suffered some tremendous abuse. And it's whether that's physical, whether it's sexual, it could be emotional, it could be neglect. And really what we've got to look at is we've got a child here that needs care and attention and love. And we think that if you put in the right boundaries, and you can then you can see the benefits. But, a lot of children have been misled and let down by adults. So we've got to lower our expectations of children as well, and say, actually, we'll get there. But it's not, it's just, for us, it's a very different process, because it's clearly that one is for a permanent relationship with no contact with the parents or extended family, whereas the other one is with fostering, and we are promoting a contact, because a lot of the time it might be that when they're older, but it might be appropriate for them to go and live with a family member.
And then another next question is, if someone is a Christian, are they allowed to take the child to church with them?
Yeah, I think. Oh, go on, Phil.
Yeah.
I've never asked you this, Phil.
Yeah, it does depend on the kid. Me and my family, we're Christians, and we do. Putting it bluntly, and if I guess it does depend slightly. If a birth parent, I know we keep using these funny terms, if the parent of the child was adamant that they didn't want the kid to go, then you wouldn't take them, depending on the influence of that parent, if that makes sense, depending on the legal status. But we were always quite we go to church as a family. Is that okay? We got a lot of friends at our church, and the social workers were like, yeah, if that works, if it fits for your family, if that's what you do, great. So from my point of view, it's not been a problem.
Do you have to live in Liverpool to be able to foster through Liverpool?
You have to live within a 20-mile radius of Liverpool. What the government is saying is that we don't want children travelling too far for school. We don't want them losing the school, the friendships. and the community and the support they can get. Because a lot of times, if they end up going a lot further than 20 miles, they sort of lose a bit of their identity. And also, if they're going to be returned back to the family, or there's support if it's CAMS, or if we're talking if it's a different local authority, then it starts to get much more problematic. So for us, our sort of, we've been directed by the government to only have a radius of 20 miles outside of Liverpool, so that we try and keep Liverpool children within the Liverpool boundaries.
Last question I've got for now is, and I know the answer, if you're divorced and have 3 children, can you still foster?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we have a number of people who are in that, and they're separated, and they've got their own children. We look at, we don't see that as something that's a barrier to foster. What we look at is what your skills you've got. Clearly, somebody that's, you know, if you've raised 3 children, we have a number of probably, if I looked at it, probably about 70% of our carers are single carers. So actually, there is a huge number of our carers who are single, who have, you know, still maybe having their children, and have had those skills of, and clearly, if you looked at the 3 children, then you've got a lot of skills. Actually, we want to have those conversations with you. That's one of the things when we say about actually don't rule yourself out. I think there's a lot of misconception of, oh, well, I can't do this. I work, or I can't do this because of I'm single, or I can't do this because, and we're saying, actually, please don't do that. Come and speak to us and have those conversations, because actually there's a number of times when we're after having those conversations, we've been able to say, you know what, you'd be brilliant, you'd be absolutely perfect for fostering, but we don't know that until you come forward. So really, that's, you know, our sort of, our main thing is we need people within sort of Liverpool area to look after Liverpool children, and that's our, you know, that's our big sort of mantra. Don't rule yourself out. Come and have those conversations with us,